Turkey waited long enough for the Americans to move out of the way. Today, with an open border before them and a green light from Donald Trump, Turkey's military began moving into northern Syria. The only thing standing in the way, the Kurds, which Turkey considers to be terrorists, global public opinion, which is overwhelmingly against Ankara's plans, and the tens of thousands of ISIS prisoners. The U.S. president says that Turkey will take care of them. He also says that Turkey will take good care of the Kurds. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
We're ready for any attack by Erdogan, but we're calling on the United Nations and international organizations to intervene and stop these barbaric attacks.
Our mission is clear. We will bring down the corridor of terror. What we want to build is a peace corridor. That is our aim, a safe zone.
This military action is not leading to good results. If the Turkish plan involves the creation of a so-called safe zone, don't expect the European Union to pay for any of it.
When Turkey goes into Syria, they're not going in to fight ISIS, they're going in to kill the Kurds.
We must not jeopardize the gains we have made together against our common enemy, ISIS. Because ISIS continues to pose a grave threat to the Middle East and North Africa and to all our nations.
I hope President Trump's right. Every military person has told him, don't do this.
Also coming up, 2 people are dead here in Germany after an attack on a synagogue filled with worshipers. It had all the makings of another Christchurch massacre with 2 big differences, the place and the religion.
Unfortunately, today, on your holiest day, we have witnessed something terrible. 2 people have lost their lives. There was an attack on Jews and Jews in Germany.
Well, to our viewers on PBS in the United States and all around the world, welcome. We begin the day with Turkey's invasion of northern Syria. Now, that is not how Turkey is describing it, but the airstrikes and the troops moving across the border, well, they prove otherwise. Just 3 days after the U.S. president announced the withdrawal of American troops from northern Syria, today the Turkish military began Operation Peace Spring. Now, this was the scene earlier today at the Turkish-Syrian border. Airstrikes were reported as far as 30 miles inside Syria by Kurdish forces. The Kurds control the areas that are now under assault by Turkey. Well, for years, Turkish President Erdogan has wanted an offensive to push back the Kurds, which Turkey considers terrorists. However, Erdogan appears to have a different mission, stating today that the U.S. has passed the baton to Turkey to lead the fight against so-called Islamic State. Now, that means dealing with the tens of thousands of ISIS prisoners in Kurdish-controlled areas, and it also means dealing with the Kurds, who have vowed to fight against the Turks every inch of the way. Earlier today, Erdogan announced the start of the assault in 2 tweets. He wrote, saying that the Turkish and Syrian armies have launched Operation Peace Spring against terrorists in northern Syria. Our mission is to prevent the creation of a terror corridor across the southern border and to bring peace to the area. Operation Peace Spring will neutralize terror threats against Turkey and lead to the establishment of a safe zone, facilitating the return of Syrian refugees to their homes. The creation of those so-called safe zones has long been a goal of Erdogan's government. Turkey considers Kurdish fighters in Syria, as we said, to be terrorists because of their links to Kurdish militants inside Turkey. Erdogan wants to repatriate non-Kurdish Syrian refugees along the border in that safe zone. Now, the goal is to dilute the Kurdish majority there and reduce what Ankara sees as the Kurdish insurgency threat. All right, let's take this story now to Istanbul. Our correspondent Dorian Jones is on the story for us. A busy day, a busy night, Dorian. So what is happening at the border now. This is no longer just an operation of airstrikes, is it?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, the Turkish Defense Ministry statement announced that the ground operation had started. Said Turkish forces had started to cross into Syria, into these towns that have been held by the Syrian Kurdish militia. This follows hours of bombardment by Turkish artillery and supported by Turkish fighter bombers that have been pounding all along the border, Syrian border, as far as 40 kilometers deep into this territory, a sustained bombardment, and this is much the way of typical Turkish tactics from two previous operations of heavy bombardment that paves the way for the land operation, which is expected to be a far more protracted and more difficult leg of the operation, given the fact that some of this fighting is expected to be in heavily, densely populated towns, and this will raise the spectre of high and growing numbers of civilian casualties, which we already appear to have occurred already.
Dorian, without the U.S. security umbrella, what are the Kurds, what are they bracing for? They say that they plan to fight against the Turks, but against the Turkish military, I mean, they don't stand the biggest chance. Are we talking about an imminent slaughter or bloodbath taking place here?
Well, there have also initial statements that they would stand and fight, but now we're not hearing that so much, and it's not clear what the Syrian Kurds' moves will be. Will they stand and fight? And like you say, they are facing NATO's second largest army, an army that has had decades of experience of counterinsurgency, extremely well equipped, or do they retreat and hope that the pressure from the international community will stop this operation? Syrian Kurdish leaders are looking to President Trump to reel in Turkey. President Trump did make a statement again tonight saying that he would destroy the Turkish economy if Turkey went too far. But if they do stand and fight, I think their hopes will be pinned on fighting in the towns and the main city in this region. There, it will minimize the advantage that Turkey has. It will be street fighting, and this Syrian Kurdish force does have many years of experience of fighting, and they are relatively well equipped, much of it provided by America in its war against the Islamic State. It all depends really what the Syrian Kurdish leadership's move will be going forward.
Today, Turkey drew a lot of criticism, particularly from NATO and the European Union. I want you to take a listen to what the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said today.
I call on Turkey, as well on the other actors, to act with restraint and to stop operations already, as we are speaking, underway. If the Turkish plan involves the creation of a so-called safe zone, don't expect the European Union to pay for any of it.
All right, so that's the European Union saying we're not going to pay for what you're about to cause or create. How is all of this going down, though, inside Turkey? What's public opinion like, Dorian?
Well, I mean, all the main political parties, with the exception of Turkey's pro-Kurdish party, support this operation. There was a vote in Parliament earlier this week to sanction it, and all the parties united. And within the Turkish media, although much of it is now under direct or indirect control of the government, are presenting a real nationalist front, saying that this is a fight to protect Turkey from the threat of terrorism. And according to Turkish media, this and the government, that this Syrian Kurdish militia is linked to Kurdish insurgents that have been fighting for decades inside Turkey. So there is broad support among large parts of the public, but it will depend on how this operation unfolds in the coming days and weeks. If it results in international sanctions, and particularly from the US, that hits hard Turkey's economy, then that could pose major problems for President Erdogan. If there are mounting casualties or another refugee crisis, again, this could cause problems for Erdogan. It's a high-risk operation, but especially as Erdogan has put his credibility on the line for the success of this operation.
DW's Dorian Jones on the story for us tonight in Istanbul. Dorian, thank you. Well, as we heard, the United States set all of this in motion on Sunday with President Donald Trump's shock announcement that U.S. troops are pulling out of northern Syria and leaving the Kurds to fend for themselves. The move was slammed by both Democrats and Republicans. The president kept pushing back until today. The White House releasing this statement on the Turkish offensive. The United States does not endorse this attack and has made it clear to Turkey that this operation is a bad idea. Turkey has committed to protecting civilians, protecting religious minorities, including Christians, and ensuring no humanitarian crisis takes place, and we will hold them to this commitment. Well, the assurances of the Trump White House don't mean much tonight to the Kurds in northern Syria. The security umbrella provided by U.S. forces has been removed. The Kurds are now bracing for an assault by the Turkish military. I spoke tonight with Kino Gabriel, spokesman for the Syria Democratic Forces, that's the military arm of the Kurds, and I asked him, does he blame the United States for what is happening now at the border?
We know that Turkey is an ally for the U.S. and it is part of NATO, but we have reached an agreement. Mainly it was directed by the United States and Turkey with our approval and or with coordination with us. We were angry and we were confused by this decision.
Well, Kurds there, somewhat angry, somewhat confused. Let's go to Washington now and bring in Brad Bowman. He is Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power. He has served as a national security advisor in the U.S. Senate. Brad, it's good to have you back on the show. When you consider what all has happened this week, and when you hear what the Kurdish spokesman there just said, what's your reaction to the U.S. role in all of this?
Thank you. I think the Kurdish spokesman was being gracious. I'll be more direct. I think President Trump's decision was morally wrong and strategically short-sighted. I think, in short, it's shameful. As a patriotic American, this is an embarrassing moment for me. This is something that I think we will look back on and regret. And I think this is no way to treat our Kurdish partners. Without their help, we could not have deprived ISIS of its caliphate without sending thousands of American ground forces and all the casualties, American casualties that would have been associated with that. So this is a breaking of faith. As someone who served in the U.S. Army, I would say this is a clear breaking of faith, and I put the blame at the feet of Donald Trump.
What do you make of the report that went out today of Trump handing over the fight against Islamic State to the Turkish president?
I think that's laughable. I think that's laughable. I think if the president's goal is to reduce the demand for U.S. forces in Syria, in reality, he's doing just the opposite. President Trump has given a gift to Assad, to Putin, to Iran, and to ISIS. We already see SDF guards that are feeling pressure to move to the fight with Turkey. That means probably fewer guards at their many detention facilities where thousands of ISIS fighters are detained. So we're probably going to see more ISIS fighters on the battlefield, and which is going to contribute potentially to a regional ISIS resurgence and more terror attacks abroad. Some of these ISIS fighters may find their way through Turkey, of course, to Europe and potentially the United States. So this is an unmitigated disaster instigated by the ill-informed decision of President Donald Trump.
There are also reports today that Kurdish forces have already contacted Russia and asked for cover. I mean, this has got to be, the last thing that the United States wants in terms of foreign policy.
I would agree with you. You'd think after September 11th that Americans would understand that problems in the Middle East, that there's a famous quote that isolationists in the United States like to quote from John Quincy Adams, 1821, America should not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. The problem is here in the 21st century, as opposed to the 19th century, those monsters can and do come here and kill us. You'd think that would be a lesson that Americans would not need to be reminded of after 9/11. But this is a surefire way to have those monsters come here and get us sooner or later. This is exactly the kind of deployment we should be doing in the Middle East. A few hundred or a few thousand Americans working with tens of thousands of partners to address a shared threat. Yet that's exactly the kind of deployment, the kind of economy of force deployment that is wise that President Trump is trying to end. And I think it's a big mistake that we're going to regret, unfortunately.
Yeah, and your sentiment is shared by a lot of people in Washington. We've seen key supporters of Trump condemn the move. Here is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Take a listen.
So everybody is telling him this won't work, but he's doing it anyway,
right,
just like Obama. And Erdogan is not our friend, and Congress will push back. We're not giving Turkey a green light in Congress, and we're not going to abandon the Kurds. If the president does so, we won't.
All right. We've got clearly there Congress saying we've got authority, the president's got authority. We don't know what one hand is doing, what the other hand is doing. Can Trump pull things back? Can he, do a 180 here? And can we possibly even see some troops or some forces going back in to Syria? Is that possible after what has happened this week?
It would have been better if the White House had not issued the statement that they did on Sunday. It would be better that President Trump had not tweeted the, frankly, incoherent tweets that he did in the last 48 hours. I believe, though, if President Trump speaks with a clear voice to Ankara and from a position of strength and clarity, that would have some impact. But it's going to be much harder to stop something once it's already begun. I think the president, there's some talk of a meeting at the White House between Erdogan and President Trump. What a mistake that would be. How awkward would it be for President Trump to be meeting with Erdogan as Turkey is attacking the Syrian Democratic Forces who helped defeat ISIS's caliphate? I think we should also impose CAATSA sanctions for Turkey's acquisition of S-400 at this moment as well. I think a strong approach is necessary. Turkey's creating a huge additional humanitarian disaster in Syria on the poor Syrian people who've already endured so much.
And, you're talking there, Brad, about a member of NATO, but Turkey is not, at the moment, is not acting like what we would expect a member of NATO to act, and Turkey appears to be doing it with the blessing of the U.S. president. Yeah,
you took the words right out of my mouth. In fact, I've written that sort of thing publicly. Yes, Turkey is a NATO member, but unlike what the president tweeted, they are not a member in good standing, at least in my view. That's not a legal or technical term, but if you look at their actions, they're not acting like an ally. An ally does not purchase an air defense system from the leading threat to the alliance, Russia. An ally doesn't do that. So, I was taught early on that you judge someone by their actions, and Turkey's actions are not those of a good ally right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have to, if you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk as well. Brad Bowman in Washington tonight. Brad, as always, we appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.